Uncertainty surrounding a second round of potential talks between Iran and the United States this morning as the end of a 2-week ceasefire looms. Vice President J.D. Vance is expected to take part in the talks being held again in Pakistan. A foreign diplomat inside Tehran close to those talks tells MS Now an Iranian delegation led by the country's parliamentary speaker and foreign minister will travel to Islamabad today for those negotiations, but only if Vance is present. This morning, President Trump weighed in, posting on social media, Iran has violated the ceasefire numerous times. This comes as the Defense Department said just moments ago U.S. forces have boarded an oil tanker previously sanctioned for smuggling Iranian crude oil in Asia.
Also just moments ago, President Trump was asked about the potential peace talks during an interview on CNBC. Let's take a listen.
Well, as I said 2 days ago when they said they won't send them, I said they'll be sending them. They have no choice but to send them. What I think is that we're going to end up with a great deal. I think they have no choice. We've taken out their Navy. We've taken out their Air Force. We've taken out their leaders, frankly, which does complicate things in one way, but these leaders are much more rational. It is regime change, no matter what you want to call it, which is not something I said I was going to do, but I've done it. Indirectly, maybe, but I've done it. And I think we're in a very strong negotiating position to do what other presidents should have done during a 47-year period. The blockade has been a tremendous success. They said 2 days ago, we will open the strait. I said, no, we're not going to open the strait until we have a final deal. No, we want to open the strait. They said, we're not opening. We totally control the strait, just so you understand, for all the fake news out there.
The deadline for the ceasefire is tomorrow. If it looks like things are progressing, will you not necessarily extend it to a definitive amount of time, but will you let it keep going if there's progress in the talks before taking...
Well, I don't want to do that. We don't have that much time because by the time both parties get there, as you know, they just got the okay to go forward, which I knew they were going to do anyway. I mean, I don't think they had a choice. They have to negotiate. And, you know... the one thing I'll say is this, Iran can get themselves on a very good footing if they make a deal. They can make themselves into a strong nation again, a wonderful nation again. They have incredible people. But they seem to be, bloodthirsty. They're led by some very, very unfortunately tough people. And I don't mean tough in a good way. I think it's very negative for the country because we're much tougher than they are, like not even close. But they have to use reason, and they have to use common sense, and they can get themselves into a great position to make themselves into a great country, but a legitimate country, not a country based on death and horror.
I think regimes only respond to certain things, and I understand your threats to bomb the bridges in the electric grid, but I don't think the regime cares about the people of Iran. And if you did that, I'm sure it's the last thing you'd probably want to do, but it would hurt at least some of the people that we care about and why we embarked on this in the first place. So that would be, I'm sure, a last resort for you.
It's not my choice, but it will also hurt them. It'll hurt them militarily. They use the bridges for their weapons, for their missile movements.
You're saying that you need at least the prospects for a signed deal today and tomorrow, or else you would resume bombing Iran?
Well, I expect to be bombing because I think that's a better attitude to go in with. But we're ready to go. I mean, the military is raring to go. We've totally won the war. You know, if you read the New York Times, you think, oh, gee, when are we surrendering? We have totally beat them militarily and otherwise. I mean, I wish you could hear the conversations we have with him, with them. We are victorious. If we left right now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild, and they can't get the nuclear dust because it was obliterated by the B-2 bombers that went in.
A lot to fact check there from President Trump's interview that just wrapped up with CNBC. First of all, to saying that Iran's new leaders are more reasonable, moderate. Actually, U.S. intelligence assessed they're actually far more hardline than those who were in power before, also suggesting that the U.S. controls the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, certainly there is that U.S. naval blockade, but Iran is shown that they have extraordinary influence over the Strait of Hormuz, firing upon vessels over the weekend that did try to cross it after Tehran announced it would be closed again. Trump also in that interview, though we didn't hear the sound, suggested that had he been president, he would have won the Vietnam War. So add that to his list of accomplishments, perhaps. So let's bring in now White House correspondent for Bloomberg, Jeff Mason, who had his own interview of President Trump yesterday. Jeff, good to see you. Tell us a little bit about what Trump told you.
Yeah, good fact-checking there, Jonathan. A lot of what you just played from his interview with CNBC echoed what he said to me yesterday, including the fact that he had some optimistic tone regarding negotiations. He thought that negotiations could go well for both parties, he said to me. But he also said he was not in a rush to get a deal. And that was a bit of a shift from last week when a lot of the sentiment coming out of the president and the White House was around basically the idea that a deal was nearly done. And that, of course, is another thing that requires fact-checking. That's just not the case. So he said yesterday that he was, to me, that he's not in a rush to make a deal. He doesn't want to be pushed into a bad deal. And he also said what he repeated on CNBC, that he's not going to open the strait, which is his way of saying he's not going to lift the blockade.
Let's bring into the conversation MS Now's senior national security reporter David Rohde here in studio with us. David, good morning. So it's a little bit head spinning for people who wake up every morning trying to figure out where we are in this war. On the one hand, President Trump says it's basically over. We've already won the war militarily. It's just a matter of crossing the T's and dotting the I's. On the other hand, you have Iran in control of the Strait of Hormuz still. The regime has not changed, as John accurately fact-checked. It's just different guys with perhaps more extreme views than the people who were in there. So as these negotiations perhaps take place in Pakistan with the vice president there, what is on the table? What are they negotiating right now?
The key thing is just extending this ceasefire that will end on Wednesday. But this is maybe a rare moment in Donald Trump's career where his false statements are rebutted by facts on the ground, i.e. gas prices. How many tankers are actually making their way out of the Strait of Hormuz? And so the problem is that his rhetoric is, not matching reality. And then I don't know, and I keep looking at both of you, Jonathan, too, but he's under enormous pressure right now. The Wall Street Journal piece yesterday that talked about his fears of being seen as Jimmy Carter. So his extraordinary, and it's a gift he has for messaging and just saying something and people believing it's true if you say it enough times, is being put to the test in a new way by war.
Yeah, and you're right. That's one of his superpowers. He just sort of says something, he asserts his own reality, and often he can create it, and he has people go along with it. Iran's not doing that. They have fact-checked him in real time. They put up animated Lego videos that mock him, whatever it might be. And then this morning, as the vice president is, we assume, set to depart from Islamabad, he has not yet. So it's unclear whether these talks will happen. Mixed messaging from Iran, whether they'll be there or not. We have President Trump taking it to social, saying that Iran has violated the ceasefire several times. It doesn't seem like I know his one speed is to go bigger, to go stronger, to go tougher. He's trying to intimidate Iran, but every day in this conflict so far, that simply hasn't worked.
No, it hasn't worked, and that's the approach that worked in New York real estate and worked in American politics. But it's not working so well here. And the question is, how Americans will view it, obviously, as this continues. But I think there will be a ceasefire extension. I think that helps Iran. But I don't, at this point, given all the signals, I don't see a long-term deal.
So, Jeff, the president, obviously, in your conversation or never publicly or perhaps even privately will betray any nerves about or doubts about what's happening in the war right now. But we have so much reporting around him that perhaps this has not gone the way he imagined it would go, that it's been more difficult to institute regime change, that he didn't fully expect or anticipate that the Strait of Hormuz would be locked down by Iran the way it has been. So as you talk to people, perhaps not the president himself, but around the administration, where are they feeling right now? How are they about the state of the war?
Well, what I will tell you, Willie, is in our conversation yesterday, when I asked the president about whether or not he thought Iran had leverage because of the Strait of Hormuz, that question really got under his skin, and he kind of went after me, which he's done before, so I'm used to that. But it was telling to me that any suggestion, and in this case it was just a straightforward question, that the other party may have more leverage than he does or than the United States does, is something that sets him off, and it did. So to your broader question, I think that people around him are concerned about the political impacts of this. Certainly, the White House is keeping an eye on polls and is looking towards the midterm elections. As I don't need to tell you or your viewers, there's a lot of political risk from this war for President Trump because of the high gasoline prices that David was just referring to, and because of the impact that that could have on Republicans in the midterm elections. So the president, then this was showing last week, is eager to end the war, and yet, as he said to me and is repeating again, he doesn't want to have a bad deal, because that's also a huge part of his identity, right? He's a deal maker, and he doesn't want a legacy of having started this war and then coming out with a deal that is not something that he can point to and be proud of in some way.
He does occasionally betray his concerns, like when Chris Wright, his energy secretary, said, well, we're not going to have gas prices at $3 for another year or so. He quickly said, that's not true. They'll come down as soon as I end this war. We're going to